Do you own one of these guns? Or do one of your family members have one? It could be worth a fortune. Perhaps nobody you know even understands the true value of it. These are the top 10 firearms that belong in a vault, not on a trading block. At number 10, the AK-47 with a milled receiver, type 1, 2, or 3, built before 1959. Most people assume every AK ever made is functionally the same rifle wearing a different coat of paint. That assumption is costing collectors real money. When Kalashnikov's design first reached Soviet production lines in 1947, the receiver, the structural backbone that houses the trigger group and carries the barrel, was machined out of a solid block of steel. Craftsmen cut away material until the shape of the rifle emerged from raw stock. It was slow and expensive, and it produced a receiver of remarkable rigidity. In 1959, the Soviets abandoned that method for stamped sheet steel, a faster and cheaper process that eventually made the AK the most manufactured rifle on the planet, with well over 100 million units in circulation. That sheer volume is exactly why the early milled guns stand apart. They represent the design before mass production reshaped it, and with American import law freezing the number of legally transferable pre-1989 examples, the supply on this side of the Atlantic will never grow again. Identifying one isn't hard once you know what to check. Look at the receiver itself. A milled gun has visible machining lines and a noticeably heavier, denser feel in the hand compared to the thin stamped sheet metal that came after. Many collectors weigh an unfamiliar rifle before they even check the markings, because the difference in mass alone tells most of the story. Current market value runs $6,000 to $20,000 and climbing for documented, correctly verified milled examples, and the Type 1 variants, the earliest and rarest of the three, sit at the very top of that range whenever one actually surfaces for sale. Moving down to number 9, the Walther PPK from the pre-war Zeiss era of production. Everybody knows this pistol because of James Bond. Almost nobody knows it deserves to be remembered for something far bigger than a movie franchise. The PPK, released in 1931, was among the first semi-automatic pistols to merge a double-action first shot with single-action follow-up shots in one compact frame. Before this design, you either carried the hammer back and risked an accidental discharge, or you had to rack the slide under pressure before you could fire at all. Walther solved both problems at once, and that solution became the blueprint nearly every modern service pistol still follows. The pre-war guns, especially those carrying correct Eagle-proof stamps and verified acceptance markings, were built before wartime shortages forced Walther to cut corners on fit and finish. That makes them the purest expression of the design Walther's engineers actually intended. The slide-to-frame fit on these early guns is noticeably tighter than on later wartime production, and the bluing carries a depth and consistency that the factory simply could not maintain once material shortages and labor pressures hit Germany in the early 1940s. Collectors specifically hunt for the small details, correct grip panels, the right magazine with matching proof marks, and a barrel that has never been swapped for a post-war replacement. Clean, correctly marked pre-war examples are bringing $1,500 to $5,500 today, and that number has been climbing steadily as the supply of unaltered guns shrinks every year. At 8, we have the Browning Auto 5, specifically the pre-World War II Belgian-built Sweet 16. John Moses Browning put his name on the 1911, the high power, the BR, and the M2 machine gun. Yet he called the shotgun his proudest piece of engineering. Released in 1902, it was the first semi-automatic shotgun to actually succeed commercially, and it ran on a long recoil system Browning invented because gas operation, the method rifles used, couldn't handle the violent and inconsistent pressures a shotgun shell produces. In long recoil, the barrel and bolt travel backward together for the entire recoil stroke before separating and returning, the barrel snapping forward first while the bolt strips a fresh shell off the magazine tube. It is a visibly different cycling motion from anything else in a shotgun rack, topped off by that unmistakable humped receiver silhouette you can spot from across a room. The Belgian guns built at Fabrique Nationale, under Browning's own supervision, used hand-fitted internals and a clever adjustable friction ring system inside the magazine tube that let the shooter tune the gun for different loads. Something later mass production versions simplified away entirely. The Sweet 16 variant in particular earned its nickname from shooters who praised its balance. A frame built specifically smaller and lighter for the 16-gauge shell rather than just a bored-out 12-gauge receiver. Original, unmolested Belgian Sweet 16s are now trading for $1,500 to $4,000, with engraved or higher-grade examples pushing well past that ceiling at specialty auctions. Number 7, the M1 Garand, but only in a correct, fully matching Springfield Armory configuration. The mechanical story gets repeated constantly. The in-block clip, the gas system tapping propellant gas to throw the operating rod rearward, the rifle that carried American soldiers from Normandy through Korea. What rarely gets mentioned is the part that actually drains money out of unsuspecting owners' pockets. These rifles spent decades cycling through arsenal rebuilds, and a Garand that left the factory in 1943 with every original part might come home wearing a 1955 barrel, a replacement stock, and an operating rod stamped by a completely different manufacturer. None of those parts are fake, they're simply not original to that serial number, and the gap in value between a fully matching rifle and a mismatched one runs into the thousands. Checking for this takes patience, not luck. The serial number on the receiver should correspond to a manufacturing date that lines up with the barrel date stamp, the stock cartouche, and the markings on the operating rod and bolt. Reference books and online serial number databases exist specifically because this single mismatch is the most common way an inherited Garand quietly loses most of its value before anyone realizes what happened. Correct field-grade examples bring $1,200 to $3,500, while documented all-matching Springfield originals climb past $5,000. And rare wartime Winchester-built examples, produced in far smaller numbers than Springfield's output, command a premium on top of that whenever they're confirmed correct. We're almost halfway down this list, and every gun so far has hidden a detail most owners never learn until they've already sold the thing for nothing. Tell me in the comments which one of these first 4 surprised you most. And keep watching, because one of the next 6 is a piece most people don't even classify as a collectible yet, and the window to buy in cheap is closing fast. At number 6, we have the Smith & Wesson Model 29 in its pre-lock, 4-screw configuration. Clint Eastwood made this revolver a household name in .44 Magnum, but the collector value lives entirely in details the camera never showed you. The earliest production guns used 4 screws to hold the side plate in place, one in front of the trigger guard, one behind it, one above the trigger, and one at the rear. Every redesign trimmed that number down, first to 3 screws, then 2, and every reduction quietly made the previous generation more desirable in hindsight. Then in 2001, Smith & Wesson installed an internal key-operated lock into the hammer assembly as a safety feature. And for a large share of serious shooters, that single change turned the Model 29 from a working revolver into a piece of history. The fastest way to check your own gun is simple. Open the cylinder and look at the frame just above the cylinder release. A small keyhole stamped into the metal means it's a post-2001 lock gun. No keyhole, and you're already in pre-lock territory, which is the entire market collectors are chasing right now. Count the screws on the side plate next, because 4 genuine screws on an early frame puts that revolver into a different price category entirely than a later 3 or 2 screw examples. Pre-lock examples run $1,200 to $3,500, and original 4-screw frames in excellent condition climb to $5,000 and beyond, especially in the longer barrel lengths that collectors consider the most desirable configuration. Number 5, the Luger P08, specifically World War I era guns built by DWM. No semi-automatic pistol in history cycles the way this one does. Instead of a barrel that tilts or rotates to unlock, the Luger uses a toggle joint sitting on top of the action that snaps upward like a knee bending backward the instant the gun fires. That motion ejects the spent case, compresses the recoil spring, and feeds a fresh round, all visible to the naked eye in a fraction of a second. Building that mechanism reliably demanded machining tolerances far tighter than competing pistols of the era required, which is exactly why so few intact examples survive. DWM, full name Deutsche Waffen- und Munitionsfabriken, produce the finest wartime examples and value lives or dies on matching serial numbers across the frame, barrel, toggle assembly, and magazine. A mismatched Luger, often the result of someone unknowingly swapping parts between two incomplete guns, is worth a fraction of a correct one. Every serious appraisal starts the same way, comparing the last two digits of the serial number stamped on the frame against the barrel, the toggle links, and the magazine, because even a single mismatched digit can cut the value dramatically. The chamber date stamp matters just as much, since a 1916 or 1917 dated example tied to documented wartime issue carries a meaningful premium over an undated or commercially produced gun. Matching DWM examples from the First World War bring $1,800 to $8,000, with correct holsters, toolkits, and extra magazines adding real money on top whenever they survive together as a set. Making number 4 on our list is the Winchester Model 70, pre-1964 production, still known in collector circles as the rifleman's rifle. In 1964, Winchester swapped the original controlled round feed action, a design borrowed straight from Paul Mauser's '98 system, for a cheaper push feed action. In controlled feed, the extractor claw grabs the cartridge the second it leaves the magazine and never lets go until it's seated in the chamber, which matters enormously to a hunter facing dangerous game with one shot to load. Push feed simply shoves the round forward and only catches it once it's already in the chamber. It functions fine under normal use, but serious hunters and gunsmiths immediately felt the difference, describing the older action as cycling with the precision of a finely tuned instrument rather than a mass-produced part. Buyers checking for an authentic pre-64 should look closely at the action itself, since the bolt shroud, the trigger guard, and the floor plate on genuine pre-64 rifles were all machined steel, while post-64 parts switched to cheaper stamped components and a noticeably different checkering pattern on the stock. Because the pre-64 reputation is so strong, fakes and upgraded post-64 actions occasionally surface dressed up to look original, so verifying the serial number against Winchester's known production ranges before any purchase is essential. Pre-64 rifles in desirable chamberings like .2, 70 Winchester, .30-06, and the rare .458 Winchester Magnum bring $1,200 to $4,500 depending on configuration and condition, with super-grade examples in the rarer African calibers regularly clearing that range entirely. At 3, the Colt Single-Action Army, first generation, built before 1898
on the ground. Break it up.
on the original black powder frame. This is not a cowboy movie prop. This is one of the most precisely timed mechanisms ever built into a production revolver. The hammer must be cocked by hand for every shot, but what made the design dominant was the interaction between the hand, the small internal part that rotates the cylinder, and the bolt that locks each chamber into perfect alignment with the barrel. That famous 3-click cocking sequence is the sound of 3 separate mechanical stages engaging in sequence. And on a well-fitted original, that sequence is unmistakably tighter than anything that came after it. Pre-1898 guns used a slightly different frame alloy suited to black powder pressures, and because federal law classifies them as antiques, they require no FFL transfer at all, which makes them genuinely easier to buy, sell, and inherit across state lines than almost any other firearm on this list. The case-hardened finish on an original frame produces a distinctive mottled pattern of blues, grays, and straw colors that no modern reproduction has ever fully replicated, and collectors examine that pattern closely alongside the grips and the verified serial number before paying top dollar. First-generation Colts with correct grips, original case-hardened finish, and verified factory records bring $4,000 to $50,000 or more at serious auction. And documented examples tied to known historical figures or frontier lawmen routinely shatter even that ceiling. Nearly there now and sitting at our number 2 spot, the Colt Python, original production from 1955 to 1999, in early royal blue first-generation finish. Every Python barrel left the factory hand-lapped, meaning a craftsman physically worked the bore until it reached a finish no machine of the era could consistently match. The cylinder was hand-fitted to its crane, with a gap so tight it delivered both exceptional accuracy and a trigger pull that revolvers costing twice as much still can't replicate. The heavy underlug running beneath the barrel wasn't decoration, it added mass that tamed muzzle flip and shifted the entire balance of the gun in your hand. Colt began phasing out the most labor-intensive hand-fitting steps in 1969, and when the original line was discontinued in 1999, prices on early guns started climbing immediately. The earliest pre-1969 examples are the ones experienced collectors hunt hardest since they carry the deepest level of handwork before Colt streamlined the process to keep up with demand. Colt's 2020 reissue, despite being a fine modern revolver, lacks that original hand-fitted cylinder marriage entirely, which only proved how irreplaceable the first generation actually is, and ironically drove even more attention and money toward the vintage guns once collectors compared the two side by side. Early production examples in excellent original condition are now bringing $2,500 and climbing, with unfired boxed examples occasionally clearing five figures at major auction houses. And finally, topping our list at number 1, the Winchester Model 1886, chambered in .45-70 government.
All right.
In 1883, Winchester faced a problem their engineers thought had no solution. The toggle link actions powering their existing lever guns worked beautifully with pistol cartridges, but physically could not survive the pressures of the full-power rifle rounds American hunters were demanding. Then a 26-year-old part-time inventor out of Ogden, Utah, walked through Winchester's door with the answer. John Browning's design used twin locking bars that slid vertically up into the receiver walls when the action closed, directing the force of firing straight into the strongest part of the rifle instead of through a fragile toggle joint. The result was an action stronger than anything Winchester had built, smoother to cycle than its competitors, and elegant enough that Winchester's own engineers reportedly studied it in quiet admiration. Theodore Roosevelt carried one across Africa, and it shows up in more frontier hunting journals than almost any rifle of its time. Early production examples, the ones closest to Browning's original specifications with correct receiver dimensions, the distinctive crescent butt plate, and the original case hardened and blued finish combination are the configurations collectors specifically chase, since later production runs simplified several of these details to cut cost. Provenance matters enormously here too, since a documented chain of ownership tracing back to a known hunter, soldier, or frontier figure can multiply the value of an otherwise standard example several times over. These rifles are now drawing institutional attention from museums with acquisition budgets. Private collectors simply cannot match, which means every year a few more documented early examples disappear into permanent collections and never return to the open market. Standard early production runs $3,500 to $25,000 and documented. Exceptional examples have crossed $80,000 at major auctions. Every gun on this list shares the same quiet truth. The craftsmen who hand-fitted them, the engineers who solved these mechanical problems, and the factories that held these tolerances are gone. What's left is finite, and finite things only go up. If one of these is sitting in your safe right now, you know exactly what you're holding. If you're hunting for one, you know what to look for. Hit like if you learned something today, subscribe because we go this deep every video, and drop a comment with the gun on this list you would never part with no matter the offer. I read every single one. Soon we're covering the 5 handguns appreciating faster than anything on this video, so don't go anywhere. Stay sharp and don't sell before you know what you've got.